What if your brain, not just your body, held the key to better health and wellness? So today on the Soul Meter with Saima, we are joined by our amazing guest, PJ Glassey, who is the founder of XGym and creator of the Brain Type Test, who has spent decades helping people unlock peak physical and mental performance tailored to their unique wiring. So tonight, we'll explore how understanding our brains can revolutionize not only fitness, but mental wellness and daily habits. So, PJ, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot. Great to be here.
It's my pleasure to have you here. So, PJ, like you have developed the brain type test. So, how did you realize brain differences could impact fitness and wellness?
Yeah, well, so I started in college getting my psychology degree. And then my senior year, I switched to exercise science and just for lots of different reasons. But they're both a passion of mine, psychology and exercise science. So I graduated with exercise science, but ended up with a lot of classes and training in psychology. That was back in 1989. So since then, I've been a real research nerd because my exercise science degree taught me how to read research and determine, what was good and what was bad as far as study quality and all that kind of stuff. So then I started doing experiments with my clients, my personal training clients, to develop a new methodology for exercise. But along the way, I was also using a lot of psychology and coming up with ways for my clients to hack their brains and rewire their brains in order to get past emotional eating issues or overeating or food cravings, things like that. Because as people want to get in better shape, they also typically want to lose weight. And so for those people and for everyone else who needed to eat healthier, because as people get fitter, they also want to get healthier. Food and nutrition is really important. Plus, motivation to work out and consistency and discipline is really important. And so we have to form new habits for that. And as we do that and get rid of old habits, we're rewiring our brain. So, with all the psychology training and my passion for research in it, I just kept doing these experiments with exercise methodology and brain training stuff based on the research I was reading and came up with some specific brain training exercises for people to help them get their goals faster. And then in the year 2000, my mom was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease. And back then, we didn't know enough to help people. So she passed in 2005. But I never stopped studying and researching because the science was changing so fast that I knew there would be something to help people with later someday. So kept studying it, kept doing more development on brain training, and then eventually came up with a test that I could give people. It's just a 20-question quiz. And based on that, will determine which brain type they are. There's came up with 16 different brain types. And then when their brain type is found through this quiz, they get specific brain training techniques that are going to make sense to their brain wiring and personality type. So then it's easier for them because they have customized brain training techniques. So then they can get health and fitness faster by rewiring their brain and changing their brain as their body is changing. So it makes it easier to get to their results and their goals, but it also makes it more permanent because the reason for the diet yo-yo where people lose weight and gain weight and lose weight and gain weight is because their body's changing, but their brain isn't. And the brain is the boss, especially the subconscious. So if you can change it along with the body, then when you get your results, your body's different and your brain is different. And you've been able to form the habits and new patterns and get past the hurdles easier because you're changing your brain. So that's the whole reason for that developing the test that I did.
That's really fascinating, PJ. And I like that how you have shown that fitness and wellness aren't just about the physical side, but also
Hmm.
about understanding that how our minds work. And I feel that it makes the whole process feel more personal and practical instead of like forcing people into the same mold. And I think that perspective can really help people stay consistent and feel more confident in their journey.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, like your multi protocol concept integrates science and experimentation. So, how can, people use the strategies to boost mental wellness daily?
Yeah. Well, exercise is so important in mental wellness for many reasons. A, it just gets oxygen to the brain, which is really good for the brain. So you have a healthier brain and more efficient brain. And you think clearly, you're able to get that brain fog out of there. But also, when you're exercising, you're working your whole nervous system, especially with the methodology that I have invented. And the brain is part of the nervous system. But when you're doing that, you're making everything healthier. So it's not just the outside, how you look, but it's also the inside. It's not just muscles, it's also your heart and lungs, and it's your nervous system, the nerves in your body and the nerves in your brain. And so that's why exercise is so important. And then the brain training helps complement that and speed that up. And then other things like meditation, and there's different forms of meditation, but it's very important. Now, the exercise methodology that I invented is actually a form of meditation because if you get down to the brass tacks and basics of meditation and what it really is, it's focusing. And lots of people do it in lots of different ways. And some people, and that's okay because everybody has different brains and different wiring and different personalities. And some people need to hum or sing. Some people need it super quiet. Other people need to focus on something, concentrate. It's concentrating. And so for me, prayer is a great way to do it, or focusing and meditating on the Bible is a great way. And other people, it's a certain body position that they're in, gets them in that state. But whatever it is for that person, that's the most effective way for them. You just have to try different things to get in your most effective way. And then the cool thing about meditation is it's a brain workout. Now, nobody is perfect at meditation. Even the oldest Buddhist monk still gets distracted when he's meditating, less than normies, but it still happens. And so when normies first start meditation, they will get frustrated with themselves because they think they should be able to focus right away, but it's a skill that you get better at with practice as your brain gets stronger. And when you get distracted and you get off your focus, then you catch yourself and then you pull back on to focus. And every time that you do that is like a rep. So somebody that's really good at meditation needs less reps, but they're still getting reps in. And then a brand new meditator is gonna use lots of reps because they're gonna get distracted a lot, but they get distracted less and less reps are needed the more they do it. And then as they do, it's especially strengthening their prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of the brain, which is where we find willpower and we find the ability to make good decisions because we have more forethought and we can think ahead and simulate scenarios in the future. And our brains can say, okay, well, here's a scenario. What do you think? What's going to happen if I do this? What are the possible outcomes of that? And this is what separates us from all the other animals on the planet is we can think into the future and simulate scenarios, and the prefrontal cortex is doing that. So when we are meditating, we are becoming stronger with all of those things, and we're able to learn faster, retain memories better, and so we become smarter, literally, and wiser. And when people are doing my exercise methods, focus is required. It's not like traditional training where you're just doing quick sets and reps and you can talk to your friends while you're doing your reps or watch the TV. You got to focus on this. And so that's another reason it's so good for the brain and why people get rid of ADD and strengthen their focus ability, concentration powers, and all that. So that's another way that it's so intensively brain training as well as body and nerve training.
That's such an important point, PJ. And what stands out to me is how this approach respects individuality, like giving people permission to experiment and find what truly fits their life. That feels
Mhm.
like a more sustainable way to, think about wellness.
Absolutely. There's no right way for everybody. There's 8 billion people in the world and there's 8 billion ways. So for fitness and health, they have to figure out through experimentation what is going to work better for them. The fundamental mistake that most trainers make is they tell their clients one way to do everything because that trainer has found the best way for themselves. And they mistakenly assume that's going to work for everybody else. That's why you go on YouTube and you type in, how do I lose weight? And you see all these different trainers and they all have a different opinion because it's worked for them, but that doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And so my brain type test figures out their brain wiring and how to motivate them, get them past hurdles and speed bumps and walls and blocks, and based on their brain wiring, their unique wiring. And so instead of me coming up with what works for me and making a PDF to hand out to everybody and tell them, here's the way to do it, I can make it more customized. And the problem with the traditional trainers is when the person comes back, their client comes back frustrated because it's not working for them, then the trainer will say, well, you just don't have enough willpower. So suck it up and try harder. But the problem is that they don't understand that their client has a different brain than they do. Different things make sense, and different things are going to work better for that person and not as good for another person. So you gotta be able to customize it and understand. And that's why a lot of personal trainers use my brain type test, and coaches and other counselors and things, so they can learn how to talk to their client.
That makes a whole lot of sense. So, are there common mistakes people make that undermine their mental and physical growth?
Yeah. And I think the most common is expectations. So the reason that people start with their New Year's resolutions really motivated because, it's a new year, it's a fresh start. So I'm really going to get in shape this year. And they go to the gym and they start working out like a fiend, and they're motivated and they're excited. And their first workout is an hour or more. And then I'm going to go every day. This is great. And then by the end of January, they become disillusioned because they expected results to happen too fast. They expected exercise to be easier than it is. And they expected that they would be able to just switch off all their food cravings and start eating only healthy foods, and everything's going to happen magically overnight. And so because they set those expectations for themselves and didn't meet those expectations, now they're disappointed. And that's true with life, for all expectations, for setting expectations for ourselves in anything, or setting expectations for somebody else. Anytime somebody feels disappointment or disillusionment, it's because an expectation hasn't been met. And the first question people need to ask themselves is, where did this expectation come from? Was it a promise from someone else? If so, then I maybe need to remind that person of their promise. If it's me who created the expectation, maybe that was a problem. Maybe I created an unrealistic expectation. And so the thing to keep in mind is just have an open mind. So really no expectations. The best way to do it, especially if you're a New Year's resolutionary, is what I call them, is to say, I'm going to get healthier. And then say, and it's going to be at my own pace. And every day, my only goal is to be a little bit healthier. So what can I do today to get healthier than I was yesterday? Maybe it is exercise. Maybe it is eating one food, just swapping out one food. So instead of pizza, it's going to be a high fiber wrap or sandwich or something. Or maybe your pizza is going to be cauliflower crust instead of regular crust. Just, okay, I'm going to make a decision, at least one decision today, that's going to make me healthier. And the decision I made yesterday to make me healthier, I will stick with that too. So I'm adding a new decision every single day to get healthier. Now, sometimes you'll try something, you'll try your decision and it just won't work, or you just don't like cauliflower crust. Okay, well, chalk it off. Don't keep that one. But the goal is to take steps forward, and constant steps forward, with the expectation of getting healthier and the goal of getting healthier. And that's the main thing, instead of getting jacked by the end of January or having that 6-pack in 3 weeks. It's because none of that is possible. And it's just important to change your focus, change your expectations, but also you have a whole life to do this. It doesn't have to happen by the end of the month. And it's going to be, if you do it in small steps, then it's a lot easier to create permanent habits and create new patterns that you can sustain instead of too much too soon and not having the right strategy and then failing because you just didn't do it right or had wrong expectations.
Yeah, expectations can really, yes, they can really trip us up. It's almost like we set ourselves for disappointment by imagining results too quickly. And hearing you say that gives permission to take things at a more human pace.
Exactly. And that's the key is your own individual pace. And if you are on the path to health and wellness and your goal is optimal health and it takes 10 years, that's great. That's a small portion of your entire life. That's fine. Other people can do it in 1 year, and that's fine. There's no right or wrong, and there's no perfect length. It's just your length. So then you achieve it instead of the yo yo, up and down, succeeding, failing, because that's actually more unhealthy than when you're gaining weight and losing weight and doing the yo yo that most people do. Every time that you lose weight, a lot of it is muscle. Then when you gain weight, it's more percentage of fat. So 50 cycles later and 10 years later of gaining and losing, now you're worse off because you have less muscle than you would have if you didn't even tried it at all. And so it's better to just say, all right, now I'm just, my goal is health. And if it takes, I don't even have an expectations for how long it's going to take. I would like it to be sooner than later, but let's just see how it goes. Now, people that figure out and that biohack and that try a lots of experiments get it done faster. And then a shortcut, of course, is the brain type test again. But even people that don't do that, they can still get there relatively fast as long as they're willing to run their own experiments and figure themselves out and see what works and stick with what works and then discard what doesn't work, which is good. It's good. Whatever you do, whether it doesn't work or it does work, it's great information. So even if something doesn't work, that's not a failure. You've learned something. You've learned what not to do. And that's great because you need to know what to do and what not to do. And so it's all good.
Fair point. Yes, that's a great reminder. Now, for people, struggling with motivation or consistency, what strategies based on brain type help overcome those challenges?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of brain training techniques that work for that. But the one that people could start with would be the why technique. You ask yourself why. Why do I want to get healthier? Why do I want to get in better shape? Why do I want to look better? Whatever your goal is that motivates you to start, ask yourself, why is that my goal? And then when your subconscious gives you an answer, that's not the final answer. That's just the first answer. So then write down the answer and then ask yourself, okay, why? Why for that? You know how toddlers will ask why until you run out of questions? Well, this is the same thing. The subconscious brain is the boss of us, and the subconscious brain operates at about the level of a 3-year-old. So the boss of us is a toddler. And so what we need to do is ask why, because our subconscious brain wants to know why. Why did you come up with this goal? Why do you want this? And so just ask that. Be the toddler and ask yourself over and over and over. Maybe you'll write down 20 different things until you run out of answers. And then you know your real why. Then what you do is you post that where you're going to see it. So maybe that's on your bathroom mirror, maybe that's on the refrigerator, maybe that's on the dashboard of your car, or maybe all of those places to remind yourself of your true why. And then you can stay motivated and create discipline through habits because motivation wanes. Motivation isn't for forever. Motivation is a great starter, but it's not a great finisher. So, habits, changing your habits and patterns through discipline is the finisher. And so, when you have that posted and you're constantly seeing your real why, then your motivation stays fresh. It doesn't wane, but it also reminds you to keep going to create the new patterns and the habits through the discipline of keeping going.
That really resonates, PJ. Like when we focus on the why, it takes pressure off, just
Yeah,
forcing ourselves to do something and instead reminds us that why it matters personally. And I think that shift could really help people stay consistent.
absolutely.
Now, for listeners who want to start today, like what's one short, simple mental wellness you would like to recommend for them?
Well, come up that would the why would be the first thing I would say is come up with your why. But then another thing to do is to work on your focus because I mentioned motivation is a good starter, but discipline is the finisher. That's the thing that keeps you going after motivation wanes. And discipline is found in the prefrontal cortex of our brain, the front part of our brain, the frontal lobe. And the best way to get that buffed up and strong is through meditation. So we already talked about meditation, but that would be my second piece of advice is start doing that, even if it's just a minute every day, because that's going to be another habit that you're going to want to continue for the rest of your life. And it will turn out to be more than a minute and some days, if might be just a minute, but that's a non-negotiable. 1 minute minimum where you're just sitting and breathing. The easiest way to start meditation, if you don't know how to do it, is just to sit and breathe slowly and focus on how your breath feels and only think about how your breath feels. So maybe you're breathing through your nose or your mouth or both, and just feel the air flowing over surfaces. You'll notice it's cooler coming in and warmer going out. And that's all you think about for a whole minute. You just think about your breath. And that's focusing. It could be something else, but that's a starter. And as you get better at meditation, maybe you'll pick something else like prayer or the Bible or whatever, like I do. But you'll find your thing, and then every time you do it, your prefrontal cortex gets a little bit stronger. And then it makes discipline a little bit easier until pretty soon your PFC is really strong and discipline is second nature. It doesn't even take any energy.
That's such a great pair. Like, the why connects people to meaning, and meditation gives them space to breathe and reset. It feels like a simple but really effective way to stay consistent without burning out. And I love that you mentioned those two. So, PJ, your work reminds us that true wellness isn't just physical, it's a mind body synergy. By understanding how our brains function and designing habits that honor our unique wiring, we can unlock fitness, mental clarity, and resilience faster than ever. So, listeners, start small, stay aware, and let your brain guide your best life.